Hi everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of the preview show. It feels like we're doing one of these every couple of days at the moment, but we're now previewing Barnsley in the EMIRATES FA Cup on Saturday. Before we start and introduce our guests today, massive thank you to everyone at Sports Broker, as ever, for their support of both the preview show and Extra Time. Without their support, we wouldn't be able to bring this to you. So very big thanks from everyone at the club to Sports Broker. The other two important people in this are our two guests today, and I feel like I am absolutely imposing on an edition of Who to Be a Terrier. I'm not. You'll see they're much better behaved on this than they are normally. So massive thanks to the Yorkshire Live duo of Stephen Chicken and David Hartrick. Afternoon, gentlemen.
Hi.
Oh.
Right. First of all, we haven't, because of the timescales, we haven't really done an extra time show for Derby. So I want to start with Derby County, then we'll move on to Barnsley. Steve, we'll start with you if that's okay. I think we'll look back on this now with hindsight. It's the day after Derby as we record this. I've read all your bits on Yorkshire Live, which I recommend everyone does, about the game last night. And we talked at the time about that we hadn't had a 2-0 win since Hull. It still didn't feel routine, I think it's fair to say. But I think it's important to put some kind of perspective on this. There's a lot written about Derby County and obviously a lot going on at Derby County at the moment. Amongst all that, they've been quite good at football this year. And going down to 10 is not what you want to do as any team. But they came into the game last night with the fifth best defensive record in the division. So if there's one thing we know they can do, it's defend. And I think we saw evidence of that last night.
Yeah, I mean, it's a team that spent the entire season fighting, against all odds and with their backs to the wall. Genuinely, I think if you could have picked any team to play against 10 men against, you'd probably pick Derby last in the entire division, because it's the one thing they're really good at is the defending and grinding out results. And they obviously, it was quite apparent from quite early on. I think first half they tried to play a little bit on the counter, tried to get some joy, but second half I think they had like one counter before Dwayne Holmes's goal, and they would just try to see out the point. And I think it's when you're defending with 10, playing a team that's defending with 10 men like that, it's incredibly difficult. You think about Barcelona against Chelsea in that Champions League game years ago, the famous Fernando Torres game, for instance, and that was peak Barcelona struggling to break down a team that were sitting behind the ball and parking the bus. And I'm not saying that Derby County or Jose Mourinho's Chelsea by any means, but no, well, was it Mourinho? Anyway, you get my point, though. They made it really tough. And I think we've seen, in previous years that Town playing against teams that do that have actually found it quite difficult. So as frustrating as it was for sort of 73 minutes or 72 minutes while you were waiting for the breakthrough and there was a lot of patience required, the fact they got the 2 goals in the end is really all that matters out of that game.
Yeah, absolutely. You just mentioned about intent there, and I don't blame Derby for this, but when you get to half time, they take the only recognised striker they have on the pitch off and bring on Christian Bielik, who I know has even played centre back in the past for Arsenal's youth teams. He's now a holding midfielder. I think it does tell you kind of their intent. Dave, when that's happening, I sat there last night, and I'm big enough to say I'm not entirely objective in this, but I'm looking at it thinking this feels like a Carol Eiting game. If you can feel like a game that is built for what Carroll brings to the team, that perhaps is a skill set that's new to the squad we have now, that ability to unlock a defence with a pass. Lewis O'Brien can do it in different ways, but I would suggest it's normally a little burst past someone that does it. Carroll feels like the kind of player last night that you do need. He is patient, but also he does have that ability to thread balls through the eye of the needle. He got the assist. In the end, it wasn't the most intricate assist of all time, but it's great to be able to call on people like Carell and Pippa and Jordan Rhodes off the bench now. It's kind of indicative of why Carroll's here last night.
Yeah, I think very much so. I think Derby were super organised when they have 11 players on the pitch. So when they went down to 10, they got back into shape really, really well. And I mean, you'll know, Dave, so much of training now around first teams is done with, a man down or an extra man on the opposition for various reasons that it's difficult to break down. It's not the advantage that some automatically assume it is. And I think one of the things we talked about before the game last night, me and Steve, was the sort of different dimension to Town's bench, how it looked like they had against Stoke on Friday. It looked like Carlos Corberan was a bit frustrated because his options were quite like for like, and it needed something a little bit more radical to change the game. And I mean, last night Josh Koroma didn't even come on. And when you can leave a player of that quality on the bench, that shows you the strength in the options you've got. And like Icing has come in and filled a hole that was in that squad for the minute. And you're exactly right. That was sort of that's the game you need him for, to break through those lines. And when it is tight, to just try and pick that lock a little bit. And yeah, I mean, it was a sort of 6-yard pass for the assist, but it's great to see him get off the mark with one, isn't it? It's great to see him on the stats board already.
And as you pointed out to me, Dave, he'd had 3 key passes just before that. Like the minutes before that, he'd created 3 other shots. So I'm saying Dave Hartrick. You know, the pressure was starting to build at that point, and I thought Carell was really instrumental in sort of helping that pressure to build and putting that, you know, forcing Derby into a position where it started to feel like there was going to be a deflection that went in or something like that. You know, a moment of magic or a deflection was what it was going to take, and it just started to feel more and more like that was actually going to happen.
In a sense, chaps, I think Carlos deserves some credit for that. But there was a lot of talk last night about patience. And patience absolutely was a quality you need in that situation. But the one thing I didn't think he waited on was his substitutions. And it's funny, he spoke to Paul Ogden at BBC Radio Leeds after the game, and Oggy almost assumed that Matty Pearson might have had a knock because he's taken a centre-back off and brought on Carol Eiting and moved Jonathan Hogg into that space. And he was very clear that wasn't the case. It was a deliberate tactical thing. He said Derby weren't really attacking at that point. I might as well have another midfielder on as opposed to a centre-back. And he didn't sit on it last night. Pippa was on really early, then Jordan Rhodes is a third sub. As much as you need that patience, he was proactive in trying to make things happen last night.
As he was against Blackpool as well in similar circumstances. Yeah, I thought it was a smart move. I thought Hoggy was coming quite deep anyway, so it was like, well, let's use him from an actual centre back role and put more of a ball player. You know, then you've got a ball player in the back line, and you've got a ball player ahead of him in Carol Eiting, who you know, we know that's one of his great qualities is his technique with the pass. So and you know, as you say, that you know, another attacking substitution late on to get Jordan Rhodes on. So, you know, you ended up with Lewis O'Brien at left back and Harry Toffolo at centre back in the end. So, I thought, you know, it was an appropriate time to roll the dice with those subs, obviously. But while still sort of making sure the back door was, you know, wasn't left wide open for Derby, which you have to be careful with.
Absolutely. Yeah. Dave, you are a renowned Brighton fan. I don't think you make any secret of that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But I think that's important to my next question, because you can be way more objective than I can here. I was delighted for Jordan Rhodes last night, and I worked here when Jordan was here the first time. He is the world's nicest man. Officially, that's been declared in the Guinness Book of Records. And so I want things to happen for Jordan. But it felt like a lovely moment, didn't it? Because he's had a bit of bad luck so far. He had the injury. He's come back. He's had to come into games and play a specific role for us at times. So I think about away at Reading, Dave. He came on basically to try and keep the ball at the end of the pitch. It wasn't about scoring. Last night felt like a quintessential Jordan Rhodes goal, and he's up there as one of the Championship's best ever scorers. And it was those kind of goals that Jordan laps up. But it felt like a lovely moment last night. Is that me being romantic, or objectively was it that?
I quite like you being romantic, Dave. No, I think it was the nature of the goal that was important, because it was a real piece of instinct to follow the shot in, get himself in the area. So if it was coming back on his right, where he wanted it to be, basically. It was just, he looks a lot sharper. And, you know, at the end of the day, being likeable is not a bad thing. I think some people in football sort of gloss over it or think it makes you soft. I can confirm on the few interactions I've had with him, he is the nicest man in the world, you know, and I can only really want good things for him. And you could see in his celebration his delight at not just scoring the goal, but I think there was a little bit of a weight off his shoulders when that went in. And it would be no surprise to me to see more from him now. And I'm not necessarily talking about like a stack load of goals or anything, because he does come into games in certain situations. So often he's got 15 minutes to score a goal, whereas everybody else has got 90. So I'm not saying he's going to go on a massive run now, but I just think he looks brighter and he looks sharper when he smells a goal. You know, he's a poacher. That's what he is. That's ultimately what he wants from every game he's on the pitch. So yeah, and it was a lovely moment. I looked round the crowd when it went in, and the amount of people that were sort of off their feet for that goal was just really, really nice to see. So no, I don't think you are being romantic. I think it's just a nice story, and you know, nice cannot be treasured enough in football, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm going to do a little bit of cross-platform encouragement, you know, on our content. But either later today or tomorrow morning, if you get the chance, I'd strongly encourage you to watch Access All Areas on our YouTube channel from last night's game, because Sam and Tom, who are our video team, captured some lovely stuff of the way that the lads, his teammates, reacted to Jordan's goal, and in particular, pay attention to Danny Ward, who celebrated that goal more than I've seen him celebrate his own goals this season, which you always talk about competition. It's generally a goalkeeper thing where they go, oh, we all get along, but we all know they really want that one position. I really liked that last night. I thought it was indicative of the kind of spirit in the squad.
There's also, my favourite thing about that video is the noise that Tom makes.
Yeah, well, yeah. And just for context, he almost runs full pelt into Terry the Terrier, so that would make me make that noise as well, I think. Yeah, but he did explain that to me because I had a similar reaction. But we're talking about options here, Steve, with Eiting, Pipper, Jordan Rhodes. Brings us nicely onto Saturday because we play Barnsley in the EMIRATES FA Cup. We're in the middle of a pretty thick run of games at the moment. So I think that there is a general expectation, understanding, possibility that we might, like Burnley, see a few different faces at the weekend. And it didn't work out too badly at Burnley on the day where we knocked out a Premier League team. I'm going to ask you both individually. I'm going to start with you, Steve. What would you do, team-wise?
As lovely as it is, and I want to be sort of on the side of those people, I understand completely the people who are still romantic about the FA Cup, particularly in a centenary year. But I think if you hadn't just had a midweek game and another midweek game coming up, I might say, do you know what, just go for the first team. Why not? You know, put yourselves in the round, try and get a good tie next time round, because, you know, Barnsley, you would presume in the position they're in, probably also looking at this wondering what kind of selection they go with. But I just think realities of football, I think you probably have trust. I mean, Carlos has talked repeatedly about the trust he has in the squad, and I think there's a big difference now between making like 5 or 6 changes this season compared with making 5 or 6 changes last season. You know, we mentioned already, and I put this in the 5 conclusions as well, the idea this time last year that you'd put out a team sheet and Pippa, Carolite and Josh Koroma on the bench, and you go, yeah, fine, like is a bit ridiculous. You know, Josh Ruffles wasn't even in the squad for the game on against Derby. So I think making changes is not necessarily what people think it is. And as you say, we saw against Burnley, you can still put out a strong squad. And I think having the 5 subs from a bench of 9 makes a difference as well, because it means that you can, if you know, you do need that extra injection, you can change almost half your team. You can throw on those players if you need them.
I think that's a really important point, actually, because as much as we made 7 changes at the, and I think actually as much as the lads who came into the team did themselves no harm whatsoever on the day, think about the impact that bringing Sorba, Thomas, Lewis up. I think it was Sorba, Lewis, and Danny Ward that came on.
Yeah,
there were 3 of the players. That made a big difference in the game. And you think Sorba then set up Josh Koroma, Matty Pearson scores the goal, but they actually made a huge impact on that match as well. So the ability to bring on players of that nature for that late period can actually make a massive difference too. Dave, would you differ massively from what Steve just said in terms of what you do this weekend?
No, not really. I think Town have got players who need to start a game. So I think Pippa could do with the start. I think Eiting could do with the start. And as you said, the 5 subs means you can hook them after an hour, and they're that bit further on in where they need to be development-wise. And I think that it makes very, very little sense to sort of play the first team relentlessly, because we saw when they were forced into that position last season how that ends, and it's not good. Barnsley themselves are struggling. You have to factor in the opposition. They're likely to mix it up as well. They played last night too, so they're likely to mix it up. It's probably not going to be their first 11. I think you go for it, and I think Town's second 11. We were talking at the game last night, Dave, and I said to you, Town's second 11 probably gives their first 11 a decent game, and certainly their first 11 from last season gives them a very decent game. So we're not talking about diving into the worlds of the Plymouth FA Cup tie last season, where Town were forced into the position through injuries and because of the COVID schedule, where they essentially had to play the B team. They don't have to do that this time, but they can mix it up enough to make sure that certain players stay fresh and few players get minutes that they need, others get the minutes off that they need. So yeah, I would mix it up. I think there's absolutely no way around that. But then if you get a nice plum tie in the next round, that's when you use your first team.
It's interesting. You just mentioned the Plymouth game. I look back on that now, again, trying to be objective, and you kind of put into context how good Plymouth were last season and how good they're now. And you look at the team sheet they're playing now, and they're flying really high in League One, and pretty much the team that played us last season. And actually, it makes me think they did pretty well, the B team, lads. I'll give a quick shout out to the B team as well last night, because this would have got lost, understandably, in the first team thing. But the B team won 3-0 at Watford in the Premier League Cup last night. So they're now through to the knockout stages in the competition with one group game left to spare. And that's in a group that has Watford, Newcastle and Birmingham City in it. So well done to the B team, lads. John Worthington last night. I don't want that to go unnoticed, particularly when you put into context that a lot of the players who you would consider your B team starters are currently out on loan. So there's a lot of different faces in there. So kudos to John Worthington and the academy guys for doing good work there. Barnsley, both of you mentioned Barnsley there, and their season they've had so far, undoubtedly a really tough season, change of manager. I think it's really important to not overlook Barnsley in all of this, because it's been said many, we're going to talk about momentum in regard to Huddersfield Town in a second. In many ways, Barnsley will just be hoping that one win they can get will set them off on a better run of results. And I always think it's weird mentality-wise being in a different competition, because almost free the shackles from players as well, where we know from last season how hard it is to get into a losing habit to break clear of that. This might be just the opportunity they think they're looking for, Dave, Steve. What do you think?
Yeah, but I think there are a lot of issues. Their squad weirdly reminds me a little bit of Town's last season, in that they can put out a very competitive first 11, but when you scratch below that surface, it's there's not an awful lot there. They've lost a couple of key players as well, and they are really struggling to replace them. They haven't filled, particularly I think it's the Alex Mowat-sized hole in their midfield that they're really, really missing. So I think that the thing is about Barnsley is that it's not that you don't respect them or anything like that, but I certainly don't think you fear them. You play them. I've said this to Steve many times about Town's opposition and going into games. You play them where they are in the table. I know it's a cup game, but there's a reason Town are where they are, and there's a reason why Barnsley are where they are. So, I think obviously, we know Carlos Corberán will know all about Barnsley, or know everything he needs to know about every player that's likely to play, because that's what he does. But yeah, I don't think we need to fear Barnsley, if I'm brutally honest.
Yeah, I think as much as Mowat, I think Cauley Woodrow's a big loss for them through injury as well. I think he's a good championship striker, Cauley Woodrow. But Steve, sorry, I'm just cut you off.
No, you're right. And I think the other thing with Barnsley as well is when you look at their results, they've not been getting tonked. They've been, you look at the league table, they're bottom of the table. They're even below Derby now. And, but when you look at the results, it's 1-0 against Cardiff, 1-0 against Bournemouth. All right, they had a 3-0 against Forest, but, a 2-1, 5-4 win, actually, in the last round.
Barrow,
So, yeah, they've had lots of sort of 1-goal defeats. So it's not like people have been going and turning them over and beating them 5-0 every week. So I think you do need to be respectful of that. And, you know, we know that Carlos will obviously be. He always says there's no easy games in this division. And I know it's not, you know, a league game, but it is a team in the championship. So
yeah, and look, we weren't there that long ago, and it was a 1-1 draw, a really competitive game as well.
Exactly.
We know from first-hand experience exactly what Barnsley can do. Momentum in the sense of Barnsley we talked about. I want to just bring it back to us as well. You know, we're quite rightly proud of this. 11 games unbeaten in all competitions now, 10 in what is now the championship for the first time since 1965. You two do a great job of analysing. It's very much your job to analyse what can improve, what isn't perfect, all that kind of stuff. We're not perfect. No one would ever claim that. But this, I don't think this run should be sniffed at. You know, we always talk about how close the teams are, the majority of teams are in this division. I think Carlos Corberan, the staff, the players deserve some credit because it is not easy to put a run of this nature together, Dave.
It's not, you know, there's a reason. I think Wagner did 7 twice. I think Danny Cowley did 7 just after coming. And apart from that, you've got to go back to Lee Clark's 1,000,000 draws.
Yeah. And with full respect to what Lee and the team achieved there, that was in League One as well. So it's a different level.
Yeah. And I think momentum is big. I think what Town have done well to come into this run is that they had a horrible November, but they didn't really suffer too much in the table. You know, results went their way a couple of times, and it's not like they suddenly found themselves down in 15th, 16th place and out of contention. So they've hauled themselves back into a winning run, and they are where they are in the table. There's no fluke at this point. There's no accidents that happen. And that momentum, you'll feel it in every area of the club, Dave. You know, you can feel it in the fans as they're walking into the ground. You can feel it on and off the pitch. And you have to sort of cherish these moments, and you have to celebrate these moments, because football is difficult. The Championship is a difficult league. Running a football club is difficult, and you can't take these things for granted. And yeah, to be undefeated in 11, hopefully make that 12. That's massive. That's absolutely huge. It's a great run, and yeah, you can't really make too little of it. Really, it should be shouted from the rooftops.
Yeah, the bit about enjoying it, David, actually really valid point, because we probably all don't do enough of that in football now and again. It's a big business now. It's you're consumed by content on it that actually it's
yeah. I had a conversation with someone in the week, and they said they were really enjoying it. Steve was party to this conversation as well. They're really enjoying it, but they had a really difficult summer ahead because they might lose Lewis, and they're worried about replacing Levi when he goes back to Chelsea. And like I said to them, you can't live your life like that. You've got to. This is where you are right, isn't it? Yeah, this is where you are right now. Enjoy it for what it is. You know, you're winning games when you're playing well. You're winning games when you're not playing well. You're not giving away points silly. This is what sensible, serious clubs do, and that's what Huddersfield Town are right at this moment. They're a sensible, serious club.
Steve, you've written some really good pieces in the season about, I think there's been 2, correct me if I'm wrong here, but 2 moments in particular you've written about where you felt like there've been really difficult moments, and the team has found a way to put in a performance or get a result that has kind of shown actually we can right those wrongs. And Dave mentioned November being a tough period, and then from then onwards it feels like one of those again where there were some questions being asked, of course, of the team. Can they do this? Are they capable of X, Y or Z? And then they kind of have the ability to kind of snap out of it and start doing it almost. Yeah. It's creditable quality, isn't it?
This is it. I mean, they had that defeat to Fulham, and I'll admit, you know, I went quite hard on Carlos and the team after that, and they made me look really daft because they won all of the next 3 games, including the 4-0 against Reading. And you know, when they had that 1 win in 7, which is now pivoted into the start of this 11-game unbeaten run, you know, you're saying, oh, what sort of trajectory are they on? And you look back at that now, you know, I've got the results in front of me, and the worst that got was they lost 2 games in a row. And it's like, actually, in hindsight, it's not so bad, really, is it? And it is. I mean, Carlos almost called me out on it last night, saying, he understands that it's our job to be reactive and look at things in the short term, but his job is to sort of look at things over the longer term. And even on a points per game basis, they're Town are the 6th best team in the Championship at the moment, and that's and if you just look at sort of the games in that 11-game unbeaten run, it's in the league, it's 2 points a game. That is automatic promotion form. That would normally see you finish second. And obviously you've beaten a Premier League team in the FA Cup as well. So, I know there's been individual games where there's been frustrations, particularly, those 1-1 draws away to Barnsley and the 3 at home. But it's kind of nitpicking at this point, to be honest, because it's not perfect. There's still things to improve, but it's hard to question the results.
Yeah, I think Fulham, just going back to that, I was gutted about the way that Fulham went down. I think it was a real horrible set of circumstances, actually. Again, hindsight's wonderful, but some of Fulham's results since that point have kind of put into perspective how good Fulham are, which no one can know at that stage of the season. It was just the fact it was the first game back with fans in the stadium after such a long break. To go like that was absolutely galling. Thankfully, things have improved since then. So I don't think anyone could have blamed you at that point, Steve. I think a lot of people would have shared your opinions on that anyway. Guys, I'm conscious of how long we've had here. It's been about 25 minutes. So, Stephen, Dave, thanks so much for joining us on the preview show. Really appreciate it as ever. Anyone that enjoys listening to Steve and Dave, who to be a terrier, right now. The Yorkshire Lives podcast, they do one every week generally. It's really good. Check it out on all good podcast platforms and some bad ones too, as Dave likes to say. So that's good. So thanks to Steve and Dave. A big reminder to everyone, tickets are on sale still for the Barnsley FA Cup game. It's only £10 adults, £5 concessions. There's going to be no pay on the turnstile, so we'd strongly encourage you to get your tickets in advance. They're selling really well as well, so it should be a fantastic crowd. Barnsley have sold out the away end, so there's a lot in the mix to say it's going to be a really, really good Saturday, Town fans. So hope you see you at the John Smith Stadium. Big thank you, just to finish off, to Sportsbroker again for their continued support of our productions like this on HTTV. Town fans, thank you very much for listening. We're going to see you at the John Smith Stadium on Saturday.